Hey guys, Jason at Hard Money Bankers. Arguably the most important part of running a hard money business and being a hard money lender is understanding how to value the assets and value the properties that you're lending on. It doesn't matter what you're lending on, if it's residential properties, fix and flips, rentals, commercial, it doesn't matter. You need to become an expert on that. And don't worry, if you're not an expert already, that's okay, but you've got to learn that. It's one position inside our company that I will never outsource or I'll never train one of our staff members on. I want to be responsible. I want to be responsible for pulling comps, evaluating properties, getting with third-party service providers to help me value it, and truly wrap my brain and my head around what the true as-is value and after-repair value is of that asset. It's the most important thing, like I said, and I would encourage you to do whatever you can to learn your local market and to learn how to underwrite, because whatever we believe the value is, and the value is also based on the borrower, how well they can execute, we lend at a certain percentage based off that. I want to share a video with you that I recently did. Actually, it wasn't that recent, it was about 2 years ago, and I saw it recently again and I rewatched it. I was like, wow, this stuff is still up to date. I guess this type of content doesn't really change very often. And I did it for a group of real estate investors that were in our office, and they wanted to learn how to properly value assets and properties that they were looking to flip. So I'm gonna splice in this video right now, and I hope you enjoy it. It's about valuing properties, and if you're a hard money lender or you wanna be a hard money lender, it's super important. So make sure you watch all of it and reach out to me directly if you have any questions. Okay guys, we're about to get started. The topic today is how to analyze comparable sales. Let me open this up a little bit bigger. So comparable sales are probably one of the most important things that you do need to understand as a real estate investor, right? You need to know what this asset is worth. And I titled this Accurately Determining Values of Your Real Estate Investment. It doesn't matter if it's a flip, a wholesale, a rental property, no matter what it is, you need to understand that value, and there is a lot of things that go into this and valuing some of these properties that we are going to get through. And I understand a lot of guys say, well, my real estate agent told me this, or an appraiser told me this, or another investor told me that. You need to be the responsible decision maker of what you believe based on the way you're going to perform related to this type of asset. And we're going to talk about all this in very large detail, but you need to be the person determining what the value is. It's your money. You need to determine what the value is. And I would say 75% of real estate investors that I talk to don't fully get what the value of the property is. So it's important. Okay, so real quick, most of you guys know me. My name is Jason Balin. I am one of the principals and underwriters at Hard Money Bankers. We've lent over 1,000 loans since we've been in business. We started in 2007. I also have a real estate investing software company called REI360, and my business partner Chris and I have flipped over 100 properties, and we own 20 rentals currently as well. But our primary focus is the lending operation, and we see a lot of this, and we're in the field every day. So that's why this topic is so prevalent, and I hope you understand how important it is. Cool. So let's get started. Okay, what will you learn today? We're going to talk about what are comps, comparables, where you can find and pull comparables, why comparables are your own opinion of value and should be pulled yourself, how evaluation differs based on your end goal with that real estate investment, what you're looking to accomplish with that, different variables to consider when pulling comps. We're going to spend a lot of time on that one, different variables to consider when pulling comps, because there's a lot of things that a lot of folks don't really fully get or understand. Other resources to help your valuation, to help you determine your value, and how I and other experienced investors pull and analyze comps each and every day to determine. Okay, so real quick definitive term of what a comp or a comparable is. A comp or comparable are similar sold properties to a subject property you're trying to confirm the value for. Comparable properties are usually close in proximity, style, size, condition, etc. Obviously, you're not going to compare a property in this neighborhood to a property miles away in another neighborhood. You need to try to find the best types of local properties to compare these to. Where can you find and access and pull comps? So the best way is your local MLS, your multiple listing service, the local MLS that is in every city, every town, and every state. Most of these MLS real estate agents have access to them. Appraisers have access to them. There's other service professionals that are licensed that have access to these. If you do not have access to this, yeah, sometimes you can get your real estate agent to help pull these comps for you, but I would figure out a way to have access as you grow your real estate investment career, have access that you are actually online yourself pulling MLS. If you have to become a realtor, if you have to become a realtor's assistant, if you have to be a licensed appraiser, sometimes it's worth getting a designation of whatever is required by that MLS charter in order to have access to it, right? Because I think it's important, and I think you can start your business, your real estate career without it. But I think it's important to do what you got to do in order to get access to your local charter MLS. So another one, obviously, you can access MLS through your realtor. The issue with that is if they're pulling comps on your behalf, who's to say they're the right comps, and if the criteria they're putting in is the criteria you should be following. We're going to talk about all that. Some online tools, Zillow, Trulia, stuff like that. They're not the most accurate, but this day and age, the data is pretty good. Not necessarily their value, what they believe the value is. That's your decision. But just some of the data they're able to pull, you can use that. An appraiser, you can go to state tax records. Like for instance, you can go into your state tax and assessment, and it tells you what properties sell for. Obviously, they don't have that data until it's actually on record. And in the MLS, you have that data immediately when the sale takes place. So it's a little behind, but it's decent. And if you don't know, you all have access to our REI 360 property valuation tool inside your REI360.net membership site, and we pull proprietary data from a lot of different sources to help determine. So you can check that out as well. Okay, where are we? Why comps are your own opinion of value and should be pulled yourself? You need to create your own opinion by assessing all this data. Using yours and other people's experience, facts, and more importantly, common sense of what you truly believe this property is. A comp, what are comps? What are comps? What are comps? You hear that term all the time. What are comparables? Those are properties that have sold, like-kind properties that have sold, but determining what's a good comp and what's a bad comp is what we're learning today, and what you need to figure out. If you see this part right here, opinion of value, what I believe a property is worth and what you believe a property is worth should be different. Now, I think they're going to be similar, but they should be different. You're going to see things a little bit differently than I see things, than a real estate investor, a real estate agent sees, than the appraiser sees, than the buyer sees, than the seller sees, right? But the thing you need to understand is you're taking all of these data, and through this presentation, we're going to talk about all this data that's important. You're going to take all of this data and you're going to compile it, and you're going to determine what you believe. This is your money. You're the decision maker. What you believe your opinion of value is for these properties. Now, I'm not saying we're going through these crazy algorithms of this. A lot of this is kind of on the cusp, common sense stuff, but you do need to understand kind of where to get this data, and voice your own opinion and voice your own valuation with what you have in hand. And obviously, some properties are a lot easier to comp than other ones. There's a lot of unique properties. Those are much difficult to comp than something that sits in a normal residential townhouse or single family house community with 250 houses in that, with 3 or 4 different styles of houses. Those are very, very easy to comp compared to other stuff. Okay. This is just a quick look inside REI 360. This is actually the old interface setup, but we don't need to spend any lot of time on this. But if you want, instead of data going, depending on where you are, instead of going to look for all the state and city tax assessment places, you can go here and under the address, you can pull up a tax record related to it, and the tax record will give you a lot of information on the property. And then, like for instance, this was a property in Maryland. I clicked on that, and this gave me all the information related to it of who the owners are, how much they paid for it, things like that. Most MLSs also have this data as well, but if you don't have access to MLS at this exact time, you should be looking at every tax record, figuring out what the state is assessing it at, the land and the improvements, how many units by right it is, how it's zoned, things like that. These are all really important things that you need to understand that we're going to go through, so to help you properly evaluate the property. Like, I'll give you an example. There's some areas of Prince George's County that are agricultural, right? They're zoned agricultural, but they're allowed to have residential properties on that, and some of these neighborhoods, it's all residential properties. The issue sometimes to come in is when a real estate investor flips a property there, and then they go and they try to resell it. Sometimes, depending on what type of financing, Fannie or Freddie or FHA or whatever, I'm sure you've heard some of those terms, some of those lenders don't allow the retail homeowner buyer to purchase that property from you as a real estate investor, that if you're flipping it to them based on the zoning type. So there's things that you need to master, and you need to understand that we're going to go through. And then here's a quick snapshot as well. This is just through REI 360. Again, this is data you can pull yourself, but it makes it a little bit easier there because it tells you kind of where all these similar comps are. A Google Maps Street View. I always do Google Maps Street View. First, I do the street view so I can see what the house looks like. Then I look at all the neighboring houses, and I use that little guy and I walk down the street. You can do that in Google Maps, or you can do it inside REI 360. And then I do aerial views. That's a really good way, without going to look at the property at the beginning, to fully assess kind of what you're looking into. Okay. How does evaluation differ based upon your end goals? So you need to determine, as a lender, I always ask our borrowers, what's your exit strategy? What are you looking to do? And the wrong answer is, well, I may flip it, I may hold it as a rental, I'm not really sure. Well, if you're not really sure what you're going to do with this, you have no idea what the value of the property is, because it is going to change tremendously based on what your approach is and what your goals are. Does that make sense? Okay. For instance, if your end goal is to fully renovate it, mac it out, put $50,000 into this townhouse, for instance, and sell it for $200,000, that's fine, right? That being said, your end goal may be like, I just want to put lipstick on this pig. Funny term. I'm going to put $25,000 into it, just kind of get the thing livable again, and I'm going to undercut the market and sell it for $180,000. That's okay too, right? But you need to understand that, and you need to determine that. What you can't do is say, hey, I'm going to sell this property for $200,000, but I'm only going to put $25,000 into it. That's not going to work, right? So you need to understand some of these things ahead of time, and keep in mind, for wholesalers, for somebody who's wholesaling a property, the person you're buying that for, well, two things need to happen. Number one, you need to know the full ARV, the full value of that property you're wholesaling to. So when you talk to your client, you can give them the option of like, listen, you can do a full renovation and sell for this. You can do a part renovation, you can sell for this. Maybe you can do a little bit, hold it as a rental, and it'll be worth this, right? You need to, as a wholesaler, you almost need to be more of an expert than anybody else, because you need to determine the creative strategies in order to figure out what works great for them. So again, there's no right or wrong answer. If you want a wholesaler, retail to a homeowner, retail to a renter, sell it as is. That's okay too, right? You can value a property of as is. That's fine. You can buy a property on MLS or from a distressed seller and go resell it immediately again on MLS. There's nothing saying you can't do that, right? There's a lot of deals that we've been involved in that we were able to get at a really cheap price, and we threw it right back on the market and sold it. But we fully understood what that property is worth. We knew what that property was worth as is, with a little bit of improvements, with a lot of improvements, completely maxed out. If we held it as a rental, right? They're all different variations. So you do fully need to understand kind of what the game plan is. You need to know exactly what the exit strategy is and exactly what the game plan is, or you can't value a property, because it's all going to be determined what your game plan is. Okay. So we're going to spend a good amount of time on this. And again, don't worry about writing so much down, since you guys all have the presentation in front of you anyways. You can make notes on that, but all of these are written down. So here's some different variables to consider when pulling comps. Sorry. Okay. Market conditions. What's going on currently in the market?
Is it appreciating? Is it depreciating? You know, we've always had the philosophy of, you know, you want real estate to be going like this. You don't want this. You don't want this or this. You don't want booms and busts. You want it to be straightforward. That being said, that's not always the case. So you do need to keep an eye on market conditions. Jump on Zillow based on a property address sometimes, and it'll tell you if, you know, the area is in declining or inclining. Go on your local MLS charter. There's always bulletins related to that. Just Google market conditions for your city. Gives you a good understanding. Now, don't get me wrong. Like, if you buy a property today and it looks like it'll appreciate by 2 or 5% within 6 months, that's great. That's a dream come true, but I wouldn't plan on that occurring, right? I would plan on whatever you value this property at today as like an exit, you know, to resale. That's probably what it's going to be worth when you're ready to go. We'll take precautions in order to prevent booms and busts, but just, you know, base it off of market conditions. Don't just assume that, oh, I'm going to buy a property and you know, it's going to be worth significantly more, because chances are it's not going to. Okay. Your neighbor's house. This is one thing that's overlooked on a regular basis. So, quick story, we were doing a loan for a guy in Petworth in DC. The value was, you know, we all believe was 600 grand. He believed it was 600 grand. I believed it was 600 grand. To this day, I still believe it's worth 600 grand. This is what happened. He bought it for like 375. He put 100 into it. I think he was into it 475 on a 600 value, which the numbers were tight, but that's how that area of DC works. And really, really one of the nicest renovations on that block, if not in like the few blocks around. And, you know, time went by, listed at 600, didn't sell. Actually, I think he listed at 625, didn't sell, started lowering price. And I'm like, what the heck is going on with this? I know this guy, he's got good inventory, this is a good product. I'm confused with what's going on. And what happened was, it was a townhouse. It was either semi-detached or townhouse, I don't remember, but it was attached to another house. And it was very, very hard to show the property because the next door neighbor's house was an absolute disaster and there was a barking dog. So for instance, you get out of your car, you're like, wow, this house is awesome. I looked on MLS ahead of time with my realtor and this, you know, imagine yourself as a buyer, and this property's so nice. I get out of my car, I start walking up and you hear, roof, 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 roof. Right? And then you look over, there's this dog chained up, you know, windows are all messed up in your neighbor's house. It's just an absolute mess, right? So the neighbor's house is a big thing that you need, and your neighbor's house on each side, across the street. Like, what are the deterring factors that will bring your property value down? A lot of people don't see that. I do know a lot of real estate, we've never done this ourselves, but I know a lot of real estate investors that will actually go to all of their neighbors ahead of time, be like, I'm doing an open house, or I'm selling this property, and I'd appreciate, you know, can I do your gardening bed for you, or can I mow your lawn, or can I do this? And they'll actually put money up just so it looks warm and fuzzy in the neighborhood to help their buyers. You know, they take care of their neighbor's house to do so. So a neighbor's house is a big thing that's over, you know, a lot of people don't pay attention to. Like, worry about your neighbor's house, because that will really help, that will really lower your asset price and the value of your property if they don't. Power lines. You know, those big power lines in backyards, sometimes in front yards, sometimes in side yards. I think the appraisal reports state that it's about a 10% depreciation, or not depreciation, 10% hit on your gross value if there are power lines. In the field, I would probably say it's about 2 to 5%, but nonetheless, you know, it's something that if you have two properties and they're worth $300,000, and, you know, one's got power lines in the back, one doesn't, you know, there's something to be said about that. That one with power lines probably will sell slightly less. So make sure you kind of take that into consideration. Double yellow lines, I just call that it's on a highway, or double yellow line, and a highway doesn't need to mean like 3 or 5 gigantic streets. A highway could be like, there's a double yellow line, there's cars going this way, there's cars going that way. Sometimes it's hard to park on the street, but there's heavy traffic in there. And keep in mind, you know, if it's a neighbor, if you're trying to sell to, you know, maybe a first-time home buyer or somebody with kids, you know, they may not like that it's on a double yellow line road. So that's important. I usually bump maybe 5% off the value just for that. Sometimes more if it's a double yellow line and there's not many properties around there either. Square footage, make sure you're comparing square footage. I know that sounds simple, but you know, there's some, you know, a house that has 3 bedrooms and 2 baths at 1,300 square feet is different with a house with 3 bedrooms and 2 baths with 1,500 square feet. You know, maybe each bedroom is slightly larger. Things like that. They're things you have to look at a regular basis. And I know all this stuff sounds like common sense, but people aren't doing that. You need the first thing I do when I pull comps is I get the subject property, I pull the tax record, I pull old previous listings from the property, and I print those out, and it sits on my desk. So for instance, I have all the data, and then I compare it to the listing, because sometimes the tax record will show it's 1,300 square feet, and the listing, if you ever look at a listing, the realtor puts their information in, like puts all the information, like whatever they say, and sometimes it's like, hey, the tax record only says 1,300 square feet, but we walked it off, it's actually 1,500 square feet, or vice versa. So I pull those, and I pull previous listings as well, so I can see kind of what was happening in it. So I know exactly what the subject property, which on your end would be the property that you're buying, ahead of time, to know exactly what's going on in that situation, or what has in the past, so I can base my comps when I go online and pull comparables to it accordingly. Bedrooms, bathrooms, does it have a basement, the year built? A year built's a big thing. In some communities, half the community may have been built 30 years ago, and the other half might have been built 60 years ago, right? You got to determine if there's, the one house is newer than the other. Floor plan styles, depending on the types of neighborhoods that it's in and the price point and who's buying in there, keep in mind, someone who might be a little bit older might want rancher style properties, and newer people with young kids may want a colonial style property. Where's the master sit? Right? Things like that. You got to understand the certain neighborhood and the targeted buyer there, so you can do this. And again, like, there's no crazy algorithm. You don't have to do all this stuff overnight, but you need to be you should have this, print this out, and have it kind of as a checklist. Say, okay, how many beds, how many baths, and kind of identify a target buyer for this type of asset. The quality of upgrades. Okay. This is another big thing that you need to take in consideration. So if you've never flipped a house, or if you haven't flipped that many houses, let's say you flip less than a dozen houses, you cannot compare your upgrades to the quality of upgrades of a huge real estate developer, a huge real estate investor that's done dozens and dozens, if not hundreds of these, right? They know exactly what cabinets to put in, what appliance package to put in, what color paint, shadow boxes, everything, right? They know everything because they've been through this all the time, and you just inexperienced with it, and it's okay. You'll get to that, but they collaborate their data from what's sold and what hasn't sold in the past, so they know exactly what upgrades to put into every property, what areas you need to over upgrade, what areas you maybe can under upgrade, but they know exactly what that is. So related to upgrades, like, first off, if somebody's a big real estate developer or investor selling something for $225, I'd probably list yours at $209 or $200, like a good 10% less, because their upgrades are going to be superior to yours until you get to the point, right? And in the future, that changes, but starting out, it's hard to compete with their upgrades. Now, the other thing related to quality of upgrades is those guys that are doing those, you got to figure out a way to either pick their brain, go into their houses, go into their properties, get into their listings, talk to their contractors, whatever you got to do, try to figure out exactly what they're doing, because they know what they're doing. And there's no point to reinvent what upgrades you feel like the owners and buyers of this neighborhood want. Do what's already working and what's selling. Go in, get their exact paint, cabinets, everything. Make your model home exactly like theirs. Upgrade exactly the way they're doing it, because it worked. Another determining factor a lot of people don't think about is the original builder in the community of the original property. Just something to think about. For instance, I don't know which one's better or worse, but like Ryan Homes, Ryland Homes, Craftsman's Home, they're different products. Some people have a stigma against Ryan because they feel like the lifetime of their house is less than a competitor. Just take that in consideration. It's something to think about. We all know schools are a big thing. You can go onto the school board websites and double check the schools. When you start really learning neighborhoods, though, you know what schools fit into what. So, for instance, where I am in Howard County, if it's an Ellicott City school compared to like a Columbia school, that's a big difference, right? And I know that going into it, and I know that the value of the property, it will be more or less based on what elementary, middle, and high school it goes to. Does it have brick siding? Does it have whatever that other siding's called? You know, look into the siding of these property and what's more valuable than the other. Take a look at the previous owner. See how long they own the property for, things like that. Like all things that are little things, but they add up over and over and over. The elevation of the property. Does it have a walkout? Does it have a walk up? Is there stairs up to the door? So we had a deal that we were involved in. It was in Glen Burnie, Maryland, which is in Anne Arundel County, and it was a nice Cape Cod property, valued at like 200. And the issue that we ran into was you had to park down here, like you parked on the street, you had to hike up like 8 sets of stairs, or 8 stairs, or 10 stairs, or whatever, and then you had to hike up another 10 stairs, and it sat on the top. It's kind of like the top of a hill. It wasn't like, the elevation wasn't all that bad, but it's just where it kind of sat compared to where the street was, and it was a unique property. It was hard to, it's kind of hard to access, so it's something to think about. Also, you know, think about basements sometimes. Sometimes owners want basements that have an entrance, and some don't for security reasons. Sometimes they want to access the basement, sometimes they don't want to have access to the basement. So things like that. And my recommendations have always been like, try to find a really, really, really similar, and not just one, but several. Even if you have to go back long kind of period of time, try to find a really, really similar style property to yours. It makes it a little bit easier. And also try to figure out who that person was who purchased that property from them if you can. I mean, keep in mind, we're getting into some black belt stuff here. We're not just talking about 101. We're trying to get a little bit more in depth. And as you know, that's the purpose of this training, is you're getting better and better and prolonging and understanding. So this is why I'm talking about some of these. But see who that person was. Did they buy the property? Did they have kids? Did they not have kids? Figure some of that stuff out, really, and learn some of that stuff so you know who your target person is going to be. What does the house face, or what does it back up to? Does it face a busy street? Does it back up to power lines? Does it face another house? A lot of houses in my neighborhood, for instance, you go down these pipe stems and then there's a lot of houses behind them. So some of my neighbors, they have houses behind them. Maybe they like it, maybe they don't. Again, none of these things are necessarily good, bad, indifferent. They're just things that you have to be aware of. And you have to take all of these things to voice your opinion on what you believe the value of the property is. That's why we're talking about these things. All these things matter. For instance, this may be a something that's not very desirable, and this may be something that's very desirable. So all things, and it's not what's desirable for you. It's desirable for the person you're selling this property for, or if it's a rental property, who's renting this property, or what the asset's going to be worth in the long term. Another big thing that I'm a firm believer of is if it's in and out in a subdivision, there's no magic formula of like, oh, this property sits outside of a subdivision, so it's worth this much less. This is something that is really opinion-based that you got to figure out. So imagine, you're driving down a normal road, then you turn left, and it's, hey, you're in Village Heights, right? Nice flowers, you're in Village Heights, and you walk back, and there's really nice single-family houses, whatever the price is, 300, 400, 500, $1 million, doesn't matter, right? And you go through, there's kids playing, you're all in the subdivision, nice houses everywhere, going through, and then you leave and you go out and you turn around and you come back outside the subdivision, you take a right, and there's another house the exact same size, but it's not in that subdivision. It's on the connecting road before that. That's outside of a subdivision, right? It could be the exact same house. It may even been like the builder because he had like an extra plot of land right there, but you got to take that in consideration. Does it have the same homeowners association as this one? Is it part of a homeowners association? Where does it sit in the neighborhood? Is it on a busier street or on a less busy street, right? All things to take into consideration. And then obviously the recent activity, how quick are property selling on the market. Obviously, if you leave your house, your current house where you live now, and you go up the street and you see one for sale sign and it went under contract in 7 days, it's a good sign, right? Things are selling quickly, and that's good to know. So Hopefully this helped a lot. There's a lot of different variables with these, but I think these are the big ones, and I think it's a lot of things that you overthink. And some of these things may be the difference between selling for $225 and $220, but that's $5,000. That's a lot of money. All these things could add or subtract to your bottom line very, very quickly. Okay, so let's talk about, where are we on time? Got it. Okay, because I want to spend some time for some Q&A throughout as well, or some Q&A at the end. Okay, so other resources to help valuation, your valuation. You can call other experts, other real estate investors that have flipped house in that area, you know, that know it, other real estate agents that maybe had listings in that area. I catch myself calling guys all the time on any property that I get stumped on that I feel is unique. I always call somebody and be like, hey, have you seen this deal, or do you know this property? It sits on this street. It's kind of funky because this, you know, or it sits behind another house. Call real estate agents, call realtors. People like talking. What I've known in this business is people like talking. You know, it's kind of a game. It's creative. Every deal is very different and unique, so people like talking. So just things to think about. You know, call somebody else and get their opinion of what they think. This whole thing, this whole conversation, research and development, try to research what we believe is the best number so we can figure out, you know, how we're going to value these assets. Land records or title records, we talked about that a little bit earlier related to, you can go to tax records and find some more information. The other thing is, I like to go to, in Maryland it's easy because you can go to marylandlandrec.net or .com, and you can actually pull mortgages, deeds of trust, recordings, things like that. Some states are harder than others. Most of it is still public info, so you could still go down to the courthouse and get it, or you get a title company to try to get it for you. In some states it's online. But I like going to land records and accessing some of that data. Pictures of previous listings to see kind of over time how that property's transitioned. Maybe get some snippets of data from that. I check previous sales, prices, and dates. And if it's a property that's really unique, especially in a funky market condition, I'll go back really far. Like yeah, on that street, if there's not many properties, like I will go back really, really far and say, okay, so right now, maybe we're comparable to like it is for 2006. Let's see what properties we're selling for then. Okay, after the real estate market busted, what was it selling for then, right? So I'll kind of I'll pull market cycles from the last 20, 30 years, and then I'll kind of compare it to that, compared to what other properties in that neighborhood sold for then, to see if they're kind of online. I know, again, this is black belt stuff, but it's a little advanced, but I do want to kind of bring that up. And then obviously the length of listing. If houses are sitting on the market for a long time, it's a red flag. Okay, I still don't know how to use this pointer. This is my last slide? Cool. Good, so we'll have plenty of time for Q&A. Okay, so how do we experienced investors pull and analyze comps? This is pretty much the formula that I follow when I'm pulling comps, right? So first off, I'm on MLS, and I live on MLS 3 hours a day. I'm on MLS looking at stuff, pulling data to determine what I believe a property is and why. So I'm on local MLS. I go onto REI360.net and use our comp, our property valuation tool. And the reason I do is because it pulls in data from Zillow, Trulia, like a lot of different data providers. And I like to see what those data providers have to offer. I constantly, Zillow isn't obviously the best determining factor of what their opinion of value is, but I like to figure out what their opinion of value is just to see if it's like completely off compared to what I thought it was. I put it in, it's got good tools related to, maybe past listing picks and things like that. You can also get past listing picks on your local MLS because you just go into the past listings to look at it. But I like to see what other data providers are stating these properties are worth, right? I want as many, much information as possible. And also through REI360, I can access the tax comps, the tax records, public records, and things like that. I mean, I know what the links are to every county website, but sometimes it's just easier because I can just click on it directly through there. I always do street views on Google Maps. Like I said, I do street views to see what it is. I do aerial views. I walk down the street. I walk through the entire neighborhood. Now, all these properties you're going to buy, obviously, you're going to look at, right? So you're eventually going to get to that, but it helps with due diligence. I like to do as much as I can in front of my computer first. Makes it a lot easier. So like I said, land records is a good one to see kind of prior recorded deeds, or what the house is sold for in the past, who the owners are. You can see mortgages and things like that, all big stuff. And then, contact others. That's what we talked about in that last slide. Talking to experts, talking to real estate agents, talking to other people that might know that area, or have listed properties or flipped properties there. Somebody who flipped the property there and say, hey, I'm thinking about getting this property under contract, like, they're going to help you, right? They'll help you do what you got to do, and they'll give you real advice. Although most of this data you can get without them, but they may say, well, we really thought this thing was going to sell for $230. We only sold for $220, a little bit less, $200. And the reason is because we found out that nobody in that neighborhood could qualify for more than $200,000. The people that wanted to live in that neighborhood, that's what they were comped on based on where they worked. So, they're capped at based on where they worked and what they could afford. Things to know. And then the most important thing is common sense, right? Use your brain. Real estate is not emotional. Take emotions out of it. It's business. You got to take emotions out, right? Use your brain. Use common sense. Use your gut feel. If this property has a really, really, really nice style to it, and this property that you are looking to buy doesn't, I'm not saying it's ugly and it can't be fixed, but it just doesn't, because the way it sits on the curb, the neighborhood, the street. Here's another good example of something. So, the way that my street works is, there's a street here and then there's a street here. Two streets here, like a connecting street. And then I'm back into a cul-de-sac. And 4 houses up is a connecting street. So if somebody's coming in this way to the connecting street, and there's one house, exact same house as mine, sitting on this corner, every time somebody's coming this way, stop sign, then turning left, their headlights go into this neighbor's front of their house, right? Every time. Also, when their kids play right out front, it's not a busy intersection, but there's cars that come on a regular basis, coming in and out of the neighborhood on a regular basis through there. Their kids have to move their basketball hoop down a block, so they, closer to the cul-de-sac. But at night, headlights are coming into those windows, right? And somebody who's next to me on the cul-de-sac as well, and somebody's coming around the cul-de-sac and they take a U-turn, headlights are going into their window. So things like that. Like, these are just really outside the box things, but there's things to think about when you're assessing it. And again, I don't think any of these things changes your mind of like, oh, I can't do this deal. This thing's going to be worth 10% less, or whatever the case is. They're all little things. Some have some are positive, some are negative. But at the same time, you can have value based on all of these and determine what you need to buy the property for ahead of time because of all this. And again, even if something's only like a $2,000, you think it's probably worth $2,000 or $5,000 less because of it, it's real money, and you got to think about it. Okay? Cool. Everyone find that helpful and useful? I'm sure there's a lot of things that you never thought about on a regular basis. I've been through it. I've seen a lot of these all the time. So if you have any questions, let's go through questions now. Ask me my opinion or my experience on some of these things, but this is what we're talking about. Comping properties, analyzing the value of the property, not analyzing a deal, analyzing what the value of the property is going to be worth, or what it is worth based on what you're planning to do to improve it and what's kind of currently going on in the market. Okay? Hopefully this was useful to everybody, and let's do some Q&A. Stop this video.